Module 4, Exercise 4 is about guardrails and stairs. In particular, same thing as we saw with windows, they can be a little bit difficult to print in situ in the model. So instead, we'll be breaking apart a brand new component and setting up to print. So this is about understanding what is not printable, building a new custom extrusion to replace the virtual handrails, and adding in stairs and guardrail combinations. In working with the guardrails, again, we have these really small, detailed elements, and I know that they're not going to send themselves to the 3D printer as part of my overall model. They're too delicate, they're too fine, we've got too many elements that are spanning. But what I do know is that, again, we can isolate those and we can print them as individual pieces flat on the build plate on the Replicator 2, or any 3D printer for that matter, as long as I make some basic modifications to how this is set up. So this is a guardrail with a wire on the inside, and so what we're trying to do design-wise is get the idea of the top rail and the baluster with a very refined and sort of transparent piece overall to the handrail. So what we'll do is we're going to first orient to a plane and get an idea of what we're looking at. And you can see this is kind of a difficult view to read. So rather than building another custom view with a sort of a far clipping plane, something like that, I'm just going to build a really quick backdrop. This is a technique that I use quite a bit inside of Revit. It's just kind of throw something in just to isolate the view and build something that's really easy to see. Again, it's not always the right technique, but it's a technique that you can learn that works really well. So I'm going to go back to my view cube again. Orient my view to a plane, select that outer edge of the deck, and now when I zoom in, you can see I have that view sort of nicely clipped there so I can see things really clearly. So what I'm going to do is build a custom component for this, because again, that default rail isn't going to print very easily, and the rails are also a little bit tricky to customize in terms of their size. So both size and shape. And so I find it a lot easier to just build a really quick extrusion as a custom component. So I'm going to set my work plane, again, on the outer edge of this deck. Need to make sure I'm getting that perfect geometry right there, that edge of polygon. And I'm going to simply trace around the outer edge of the line work. So this will establish sort of the out-to-out parameter for the handrail, or the guardrail, I should say. And again, we need a minimum dimension, probably of about 6 inches. I know that's going to build something that is at a 16th inch scale, roughly a 32nd of an inch thick. So we'll just use the offset command to continue to build that up. We need to build the center baluster. So again, top to bottom, offset, and we'll offset 3 inches to each direction. Delete that initial guide. And now it's simply a matter of closing up the geometry. Remember, anytime you're working with an extrusion, you have to have a closed loop. So I'm going to use split and trim to finish off the geometry. Make sure I don't have any extra lines anywhere, and make sure that everything, again, is in a closed loop so that the extrusion will run smoothly. Leave one more piece to trim. Then we should be able to run the extrusion. And I'm going to set a depth of about 8 inches. Again, just enough to get me the material that I need. And while, again, this looks fairly clunky in the model, it looks too bulky, too big, when this prints out, it's going to be really small. So it'll be too big to scale, but at a 16th of an inch, it's going to work very nicely. So let's go ahead and also add a stair to this. Even though there's really not a stair in place in this model, I wanted to be able to show exactly how I would go about building a stair in this as well. So we're just going to go ahead and build a very quick and short, sort of fictional 6-inch by 12-inch stair right off of the edge here, simply to show how this would come together. Give that a thickness. Again, 6 inches is kind of that magic number for working with a 3D printer. And then we'll trim and build this as a closed loop. And again, if you have an actual stair that you're working with, it's really quick to just trace everything out on that existing stair. And then we're going to stretch it over, about 5 feet for this case. So you can see that's come together as its own component piece. And now if I wanted a handrail on this stair, or a guardrail I should say specifically, it's easy enough to just go ahead and modify that guardrail that I was currently working with to go right down along with the staircase. So we'll edit this component. And what I need to do is start by working with the front edge of that last step. So I'm going to use my Pick Lines tool, give myself something to snap to. We'll come up 42 inches, standard guardrail height. Connect that to the top rail on my guardrail on top of the deck, offsetting 6 inches. Pick lines to get the bottom. We want that to attach perfectly to the staircase. And now again, we're ready to trim these lines and delete that bottom line. One more line to trim at the top. And now you can see how we've taken that guardrail and turned that into the stair rail as well. So for the other side, again, we're going to print this on edge. So the second guardrail I would actually need to print out separately as its own pass and then glue that right to the top of the staircase. So this piece is pretty much ready to isolate now. And export as an STL file. And we'll bring that into Makerware. So inside of Makerware, we'll add the file. Move it to the platform, establish the scale, 158.69. That should be completely ingrained in your head by now. And you can see what we want to do is go ahead and rotate this around and put that guardrail down flat and let the stair grow up vertically on the print. So again, we just sort of need to approximate the rotation because again, we'll use the lay flat command inside of Makerware to put that edge perfectly on the base plate. And this guy is now ready to go. Again, I would use probably the standard print resolution and no raft because this is going to be a fairly small, delicate element. So what looked clunky in Revit is a really nice refined handrail for a 16th inch architectural model. And in this lesson, we've learned how to acknowledge why printing stairs, handrails, and guardrails in place usually doesn't work too well. We've also built a new component for the guardrail or a stair, and we've built printer settings for finer detailed objects.